Welcome to episode 19 of the Mikhaila Peterson podcast. In this episode, I spoke with Dr. Jeff McNairy, the Chief Medical Officer at Rhythmia Life Advancement Center in Costa Rica. That's right, the Ayahuasca Resort. This was actually the first episode I ever filmed for the podcast back in April. I've been intrigued by ayahuasca for a while, although my gut instinct is it's not a lot different than really high-dose mushrooms. I mean, high like 7 grams. But I could be wrong, I haven't tried it yet. The episode was interesting. We covered commonly asked questions about ayahuasca, what the ayahuasca experience at Rhythmia is like, what kind of afflictions hallucinogens like ayahuasca can help. I would warn, though, if you have serious mental health problems or are prone to panic attacks, sometimes high-dose hallucinogens can make that worse. I'm a huge advocate for the benefits of mushrooms and hallucinogens for mental health, but if you are not in a good place, sometimes they can magnify that. So do your research if you decide to delve into hallucinogens, and don't be silly or stupid about it. Dr. McNairy has worked in the mental health field for over 25 years in LA as well as Hawaii. He works mostly with patients who have addictions and trauma, although also deals with people who suffer from acute psychiatric conditions. He was the previous administrative director of Passages in Malibu, a well-known drug and alcohol rehab facility. He's also managed and worked within various medical arenas at the UCLA Medical Center, Department of Health in Hawaii, and conducted therapy in psychiatric hospitals, as well as a variety of outpatient settings. Dr. Jeff is committed to bringing the ancient healing tool of plant medicine to the Western world in a manner that's safe, regulated, and extremely effective. I hope this answers your ayahuasca questions, folks. Please remember to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoy the episode and would like to hear more. I'd like to thank Optimal Carnivore for sponsoring this podcast. Optimal Carnivore makes a grass-fed organ complex in a pill form. They take 100% freeze-dried, grass-fed, grass-finished organs and use gelatin capsules as the casing, so they're as healthy as you can get, other than fresh organs. They're free of hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, and GMOs. If you know anything about my lion diet, it's ruminant meat, salt, and water. That's it. I do eat other things than steak, though, when I'm feeling it. Liver sometimes and bone marrow. I generally tell people, eat how you feel. Don't force yourself to eat organs if you don't want to. However, if you are deficient in certain vitamins, this is how I would suggest you get your vitamins. Rather than taking the drugstore versions that are filled with fillers that aren't good for you, a lot of those are filled with soy and corn, and they probably aren't that bioavailable. Getting your vitamins from organs is the most bioavailable way to do it. It means you absorb the most that way. Organ meats are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Visit Amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and use the code Mikhaila10 to receive 10% off of all of their products. If you need vitamins and you take a multivitamin or are considering taking one, this is what I would recommend instead. Jeff, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for talking to me. I'm really interested in what you do.
Cool. I'm so glad to be here. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. We're doing some exciting stuff down in Costa Rica.
Yeah, okay. So I think we should probably start with, what is Rhythmia? What is ayahuasca?
Great question. So Rhythmia is a place that is a medically licensed facility from the Costa Rican Ministry of Health. And we're called a life advancement center. And what it means is that people come there for all different situations, whether it's mental health issues or addiction or pain issues or any sort of life transition stuff. And they can go through our program, which is a week long. And we have all these different treatment modalities that help support a person's own process. And our primary modality is ayahuasca. So we use that 4 nights a week out of the 7-day stay. And there's tons of classes and integration and all kinds of support. And the thing that makes Rhythmia unique from other facilities is that we have a Western sort of philosophy based also with an indigenous plant medicine community. So we have doctors and nurses and therapists and all the kind of Western people, also with shamans and holistic healers kind of combined. So we're looked at as sort of a bridge between an indigenous old world sort of remedy for healthcare and then the things that people are kind of used to from, you know, hospitals and clinics and places like that. So that's basically what Rhythmia is. And I'm the chief medical officer there. And I've been there since the beginning. I'm one of the founders.
Wow. So how did you come to be like founding something like Rhythmia? What's the backstory there?
Yeah, it's a wild story. So I started off studying medical anthropology as an undergrad and really loved it. Wanted to go to grad school and get a PhD in that. I got into Berkeley, decided to defer my enrollment and study at UCLA and do med-anthro research for a year. That's when I saw that I didn't really want to be somebody that's going to look for grant money my entire career and be in that academic world. It was just, I liked more hands-on stuff. So I applied to the UCLA School of Public Health, got my master's in public health there, and then started managing OBGYN clinics in Westwood in California. And that's when I decided I want to go to medical school. So I applied to medical school, you know, went and got a post-bac in biochemistry and pre-medical sciences. And I got into medical school, but during that 4-year time of studying and taking the MCAT and all that, I saw, you know, because I was managing these clinics for OBGYN stuff, I saw that I wasn't really on board with the whole sort of Western way of looking at disease and illness and symptoms and stuff like that. So I kind of became disillusioned. So when I got in, I just said, forget it.
Sorry.
What's
Disillusioned as in just treating the symptom instead of the cause, or like what kind of disillusion?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like looking at symptoms, not looking at underlying issues, not really, you know, trying to resolve the problem, just looking at kind of band-aiding things. So I decided not to go to medical school. My wife was from Maui at the time, and we moved back to Hawaii. And I worked for the Department of Health, and I started doing sort of therapy type work with Native Hawaiian families, and I really, really loved it. So I decided I want to get a doctorate in psychology. So after doing some sort of Native Indigenous based sort of cultural appropriate stuff with the Hawaiian families, I took that sort of energy and brought it to my dissertation and my doctorate program back in LA. And I worked on addiction mostly. And I worked with people that struggle with all kinds of substance issues. And I did my dissertation on Native Hawaiian healing practices for addiction. So I've always kind of been in like an indigenous way to look at healing and underlying stuff. And during grad school, I managed a drug and alcohol rehab that's pretty well known. It's called Passages Malibu. I was the administrative director for about 8 years there. And when I was there, I met a guy who came in as a patient, and his name was Jerry Powell. And he was a really rough guy, super hardcore drug addict, multi-millionaire dude. He's kind of somebody that it's hard to have leverage with, because it's kind of like, what are you going to do? Like, you know, they have all these homes and unlimited money. So his life was crazy. Him and I really hit it off though, which was interesting. So I didn't work with people at the time because I was managing the facility.
Yeah.
But I interviewed this guy, and I'm like, because I would always do a 40-minute intake. And I was like, I can't turn this dude over to my staff because he's just going to just tear him up, because he was very difficult.
Yeah, fair enough.
I decided to work with him myself. Yeah. So I made an exception and worked with him. And we hit it off, and he did really well. And he kicked his Demerol habit. That was his main reason for being there.
Oh, wow.
An injectable Demerol pain med. And he was addicted. He was using a lot of it. So then he left the program after 60 days. And then he kind of fell back into old patterns of behavior, not with Demerol. He actually got rid of that. But he was still doing cocaine and drinking and womanizing and fighting. And he was just this animal, right? And I was working with him for about 5 years. I was doing some coaching. I was doing some sort of counseling stuff with him in a private practice environment. And I just couldn't get through to this guy. And there was something about him that, you know, he was a very determined person. He was very driven. He really wanted to change, but he just didn't have the tools.
Was he partying, or was he like self-medicating, or what was going on?
He was partying. He was doing everything in the book. He was he had a lot of trauma that was unknown at the time. Like, we looked at we looked at his past, and his, had a rough family, grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, a coal town, rough parents, rough dad. His mom was wonderful. His dad was a little rough, a lot of abuse, domestic violence, that kind of thing. And so we would work on those issues, but it was really hard to get to the core sort of internal belief system and get him to do inner child work and kind of what's needed to get past trauma. It was really hard for him. So on a whim, he heard about some plant medicine that was being offered in Costa Rica, and he was becoming suicidal at the time. He'd been suicidal about 3 times in his life, so he was very desperate. And he said, there's this place in Costa Rica. He ran it by me. He's like, they do plant medicine. I was like, dude, you should definitely try it, because we've tried everything. I've been working with you for 5 years. We can't, I don't know what else to do. So he went by himself, and he was there for a week at this place up in the mountains. It was kind of a rustic, not a nice place. It was somebody's house. It's kind of like how plant medicine is usually given, aside from being in the jungle, it's just a kind of random places, and it totally changed his life. He completely flipped and just did this 180. And I didn't believe him at first, because I've never seen anything like that happen. And I'm trained in the Western medical model and psychological model. I'm a psychologist, doctorate level person. And I don't have any sort of case history on people just doing a 180 like that so quickly. So when I talked to him, I went over to his house, he got back. I saw there was something really different with this guy, and his vibe was different. All of his behaviors that he was doing, the self-destructive stuff, the drugs, the alcohol, the partying, all that just stopped. It was crazy. And he told me, that he wanted me to go down there and do it. And I was like very hesitant, because I didn't have I'm not an addict, in my doctorate program for psych, as I'm sure you have to do you have to receive therapy yourself, about 65 hours. So I'd been in therapy.
I didn't know that.
And like to get licensed in at least in the US, psychologists have to go, when they're postdoctoral students, they have to get 65 hours of individual therapy for themselves. So, I've been working on stuff. I knew who I was, pretty much. I didn't have some sort of glaring issue that I thought, at least.
Yeah.
So I said, fine, I'll go down there and do it. So he came with me. We went down a couple weeks later. I was really scared. I'd never done any psychedelics. I'd never done mushrooms. I'd never done LSD.
Yeah.
I wasn't a partier. It was a new territory for me. So I was pretty nervous. But I'd seen his results. So I thought, wow, it can't be bad. So I did it. And what I realized was just the most amazing, groundbreaking stuff for me that in my life. It was the most amazing experience. It showed me why I was behaving the way that I was in relationships, why I didn't trust people, why I had all these things. And it was like crystal clear as day why. And it was one night, and I thought, this is like 20 years of therapy in a night. I was blown away, completely blown away by it. And that's where Jerry and I decided that we wanted to have a place that was really, really safe for people and had a lot of integration, had a lot of medical support, and we could screen people and have a place that people could come to that wasn't some crappy house out in the middle of nowhere. That was very expensive. By the way, that place was like $2,000 a night. It was very expensive. And so that's how that started. And I moved to Costa Rica within 6 months after that. And I've been there ever since. So that was about almost 6 years ago. So I've been there and wrote the license with the government. And Jerry was helping me, of course, doing it. And Jerry's the business guy, the CEO of Rhythmia. And we just developed this company. And now we've just been booming for the last, 5.5 years.
Wow. That's a very interesting story.
Yeah.
I've delved into hallucinogens a bit myself. I started with like lower doses, and I've never done an ayahuasca. I've done pretty high doses of shrooms and found those experiences. I had one experience that was completely transformative, and that was like 8 grams. So I've been really, it was intense. I went to outer space, but, I've been looking into ayahuasca. And so I thought we could for this conversation, I can just throw a whole bunch of questions at you. I grabbed
Absolutely.
some questions from my audience, so I figure that's a good place to start. But
Perfect.
like, first of all, like some of the easier questions, what does an experience kind of look like? Like ayahuasca is a drink, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's a drink it's composed of two plants. One of the plants is a vine, and that's what people call the ayahuasca vine, or the plant of ayahuasca. It's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So an MAOI is very important because it turns off, in a sense, the stomach enzymes, so that the other plant that's blended in, which is the dimethyltryptamine, that plant
Mhm.
that has that can get absorbed into the body. So, and then those two plants are reduced down, and it's like a tea, and so you drink that. Exactly.
Yeah, and so this is like, is it like an extended DMT trip, or
Yeah,
is it
like
different
people
than
that
that?
have well, the part that's similar about, like, when people smoke DMT, it's very intense, right? It's very quick, and it doesn't last too long. Depends how much they smoke, 5 minutes to 30 minutes. Very, very, very intense. Ayahuasca is much more gradual. Once you drink a dose, you slowly build after about 45 minutes into that space
Oh,
for a
okay.
short period, and then it starts to decline. So what that means is that probably
Oh,
for like maybe 30 minutes, you're in this place that's very, connected and visual, and a lot of these things are happening for people, but it's not as intense as like when people smoke DMT. It allows more of an integration to occur because it is slower.
oh, okay. That's actually good to know. So it doesn't just hit you and there's an up and a down. Uh,
Exactly.
Okay, what
Correct.
about these are questions? These are questions I have first, and then I'll get to audience questions. But does
Cool.
everybody get sick when they take ayahuasca?
No, not everybody does. And there's a couple sort of reasons for that. I would say about 50% of our guests get sick at least once during their week there. And there's a thing called the dieta. And the dieta is sort of a shamanic way to prepare for ayahuasca. It involves ways of eating. It's just eating clean, healthy way, and also behaving. So usually not having sex, for example, for as long as possible before, a couple weeks before, a month before, and not drinking alcohol, stuff like that. There's a way to prepare so that when you drink ayahuasca and you follow the dieta, there's less of this sort of internal sort of detox that happens because your body's already really clean, and people are less purgative sometimes on that. Now, a purge
Okay.
is actually very important because it has an emotional component that's being released. So getting sick is actually a good thing in a sense. It's not pleasant, obviously, but it's something that probably happens about 50% of the people.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I've never had I've done different forms of hallucinogens a number of times, and I've never had like a purely good time. So like it's always been absolutely fascinating and sometimes transformative. And I've had a couple of like bad trips that I would have rather avoided, but it's never been,
Yeah,
it's never been fun, right? It's not like alcohol or something.
correct. It's a lot of
Oh,
work for
oh
sure.
my God, yeah. Okay, so then how about this? So you offer it 4 nights in a row or 4 days in a row?
Yeah, 4 nights in a row.
Okay, and then isn't it, because I know with other types of hallucinogens, if you take it repeatedly, they don't work as well, like the following times. So is that how ayahuasca works as well?
Correct. Not with ayahuasca, because what happens is
Okay.
with substances generally, since I have like this addiction background, right, running places and stuff, most substances you need more of them over
Yeah.
time to get the same experience, right, or a heightened vibe. With ayahuasca, over time you need less, and so it works the opposite. So night one, people drink a certain amount. Night two, they usually need less because their body is cleared out. Their emotional state is more clear. They've released a lot of baggage, and so now they're more clear, and then they drink a little bit, they can go less and lighter. So we
Wow.
see, at least in our 4 day, consecutive nights, it's like Monday night we start and we end on Thursday night, the last one. We see that people have this amazing transformation, and Friday and Saturday and Sunday, they just chill. They do breath work, actually. They do a rhythmic breath work that we have. So there's other things to do, but it's, we see that it's very powerful, very effective. We have different themes on each night, and we help the guests set certain intentions that sort of match the theme of the night so they get the most out of it.
Wow. Okay. Let me grab some of the questions that people asked. Okay. Do you know anything about hallucinogens changing? Like, do you think that hallucinogens are used as a therapy, like a self-therapy, or do they actually change the brain?
Well, I believe in synaptic plasticity of the brain, which
Yeah.
the brain can shift and change, right? So it depends on the person. Everybody's a little different. Depends on what their intentions are. It also depends on their history of trauma or what they're dealing with as a neurochemical profile. So if we're just going to talk about like the general sort of person that, let's say, has an average amount of stress or a couple of things they're trying to work on or whatever, what we see is there's a release of stored up emotion that's been sort of handled in the amygdala part of the brain. And the amygdala is where we store most of our subconscious memories and emotions. And so what happens when you drink ayahuasca is that part of the brain opens up and connects to the prefrontal cortex. And then there's new neuron pathways that become established. And so there's sort of like this awareness vibe that occurs. And there's a serotonin experience. It's very, very key. That helps with physical issues, whether it's pain management and also immunity and reducing of swelling. There's all this stuff that's happening. And also an emotional release that's occurring. So a lot depends on the hallucinogen, but what ayahuasca does is it absolutely creates new neuron pathways, and it resets 5 key serotonin receptors.
Wow. Okay. So that's part of the reason why some people can have such good experiences regarding depression, huh?
Absolutely.
That's interesting. Can you get similar, do you think ayahuasca is unique by itself, or can you get similar therapeutic benefits from high doses or other doses of other types of hallucinogens?
I think that each plant medicine is unique in its own sort of way and what it's intended to do or what it brings forth. I think that ayahuasca, the clearest, maybe the closest thing to it would be psilocybin, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
They're very different. Psilocybin is, as you know, is kind of like you're on it. And you can have this dissociative experience that's really helpful. You get out of your own way and you can kind of see things different perspective. Ayahuasca has that same component to it in the sense that you can dissociate in a healthy manner, and then you can see a new perspective on your life and why it's happening. The reasons why it happens neurochemically is very different. And the emotional sort of spiritual side of it is different. They're both great medicines, but I think ayahuasca is unique in the sense that it's very heart grounding. And there's a lot of like this chakra stuff that I've learned, that's not one of my fields of expertise, but I've learned from these shamans, like about all that kind of stuff. And it's very grounding for people and healing as a remedy.
Okay, interesting. So there are a lot of people, I know a lot of people who haven't done hallucinogens before. It's scary the first time, and no wonder, like, because sometimes those high doses, like, that is insane. You cannot imagine what that's like until you do it.
Yeah.
But have you seen people have bad experiences, like bad trips, and have that still be positive in the end?
Absolutely, yes, we have, and which is kind of rough to like say to people, but yes. And the thing about it is, if people go off into the jungle with an unknown place and an unknown shaman, they tend to be given a lot of medicine, and that can be scary. And for some people, especially those who've never done it before, what we do is we start off with about 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces of plant medicine, which is very little. So we start off people gently. And then 1.5 hours later, we give them another 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces.
That's such a good idea. Yeah.
Definitely. So that's how people can ease into the process, and they can kind of understand the medicine a bit and guide it to some degree. So we do that every night. So we start off with that small amount and they can ease into it. Now, sometimes people have a high tolerance, they have a lot they're trying to work on. They know this after the first night. So we'll double dose them Tuesday, start off with a double. So that, we kind of manage each person. By the way, they all get prescribed this by our medical director. So the Ministry of Health requires us to write a prescription for ayahuasca to each person. And so that's how we do this. So we're monitoring how everybody's doing and staying on top of like what dose is working for each person. So for those that are afraid of it, it's understandable. Like I was terrified, but we ease you in, which is a nice way to do it.
Yeah, that's actually really good to know. The times I've done high doses of mushrooms, I've started with, still not a low dose, but I've started with like 3 grams, see how that goes for a little bit, and then maybe 45 minutes in, take a larger amount. And that seems to be, there's like a lot less panic associated with that if I'm in a panicky mood. So that's really good to know.
You know what you were mentioning too about like if I've seen people have a bad trip and then it ends up being a good thing. The way that I've framed that, because I do sessions with people all week that are struggling a bit, that have had a scary experience or something that's confusing to them. And what it is basically in a nutshell is that if I have a bunch of trauma that I've never processed and it surfaces and it's from childhood, let's say, it's hard to have a context for fear and anger and resentment and guilt and shame in my 40s and 50s because I'm in a fine place now. So those emotions, when they are from childhood, when they surface, they're very confusing. So what happens is the prefrontal cortex will give a context to those emotions and try to help them process out. So if, let's say I was abused as a kid sexually, well, I'm going to have some fear and some anger, right? That's going to come up. And what am I afraid of? And what am I angry about? I don't know, maybe spiders or maybe snakes or maybe a demon or something. That's a vehicle that my brain will help create to get those emotions to leave me and to go. So people that do have those sort of experiences are scared in the moment for a bit. But then when I talk with them and our staff talks with them, they understand like, okay, that was a vehicle to help this all leave me,
Yeah. Interesting. That makes sense. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, risks. So like I said, there are a lot of people are concerned about this and no wonder. But are there risks of death or overdose? Can you overdose on ayahuasca?
People that are taking selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are antidepressant
serotonin
meds
syndrome.
They're not able to do ayahuasca if they're currently on those meds for serotonin syndrome can occur. So we have to have people taper off those meds with the help of their physician. And then if they have 30 days free and clear of those meds, they can do ayahuasca if they pass our physical exam. There's a lot of meds like that you got to have some time off of, whether it's benzodiazepines, SSRIs, opiates, and the Adderalls and the dexedrines and all the stimulant meds, those two, you have to be off that stuff. So also heart conditions. If people have a history of heart surgery, they have stents, they've maybe had a stroke in the past, there's certain gastrointestinal issues that we look at. So all of our guests are screened before they even get to Rhythmia, and they talk to our intake staff and they run it by us and all the medical team. And then if we clear them, then they come and then we check them again, we triage them. We do an evaluation. I interview about a third of the people. We have other staff interviewing. So now, can people overdose? We've never seen that happen. We've never seen anybody that's medically appropriate have a problem with the quantity, not once at our facility. Most of the risks of ayahuasca that are out there in the world, if you think about, okay, this person was injured or damaged or hurt, what happened? It's people that are nearby that are in the same ceremony that become violent and hurt that person. That's the number one cause of injury. The other condition, the other number two, is that people choke on their vomit. That's the other condition. So that's that's never happened at our place, nothing like that. But that's why we have a huge staff to guest ratio, and we're watching the guests constantly. We have a huge amount of staff during the ceremony. So the risks are low when it's done safely.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. What do you do for people who do end up having a bad trip and start freaking out? Like, what do you do with those guys?
Well, sometimes if people have already in them a high level of serotonin naturally, which would be
Yeah.
oftentimes considered a bipolar 1 situation.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have bipolar 1 and they're undiagnosed. Like they don't even know they have it. So when people do have a bipolar 1 and we know about it, we don't let them usually drink medicine. We usually say that's not going to be a good method for them, at least ayahuasca. But let's say that they do. And let's say they come in, they don't know it. We don't know. They don't have any history of that. If they do have a moment where they're in a manic sort of episode as a result, because that's what would happen, is they just become manic behaviorally, then we don't let them drink any more plant medicine. And there's certain meds, which we don't like to use meds, but there's certain meds that will bring down the serotonin within a couple of days. And then they're back to normal, they're fine. So people that have severe mental illness are at high risk. And those people aren't somebody that we're recommending ayahuasca for.
Okay. So I've got a fairly large audience of people who probably might be the type of person you turn away. Like, I deal with a lot of people with autoimmune disorders and mental disorders. Like, I myself had bipolar type 2, which I've managed to get under control with diet, and I've found hallucinogens have been incredibly helpful. Once I was more stable, like, that's something I could tell people about too, is when I was on SSRIs and when I was having serious mood problems, there were a number of times I tried hallucinogens and it was basically just stressful. Like, it wasn't until my mood was a little bit better and more stable that I found a lot of benefits of doing them. So what about people with autoimmune disorders or people who are trying to solve like idiopathic disorders? Do you see a lot of those guys?
We have a huge amount of those people that come, and ayahuasca is great for that. And the reason is because, as we know, right, T cells that are part of our immune system have serotonin receptors. And when somebody drinks ayahuasca, serotonin is affected in a positive way. And also DMT looks a lot like serotonin. If you look at the organic structure, they look very, very similar. And so there's a huge reduction of inflammation when people drink ayahuasca. So people that have Crohn's disease or rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or any of these things, they all come to Rhythmia and they all report having a reduction in symptoms. And we as a medical facility can't make medical claims, but we can definitely say what our guests are telling us and what our alumni have reported. And they experience amazing results based on any sort of autoimmune condition that they might have had. So they're good candidates for ayahuasca.
Okay, interesting. So autoimmune disorders, people who are not currently taking medications but maybe have substance abuse problems. That seems to be people you focus on as well. And the people who maybe need to be careful about this are people who are prone to mania and psychosis, right? Schizophrenia, you might want to be careful with taking more hallucinogens for that.
Bipolar 2 is actually totally okay with us to come. Bipolar 1 is the condition that we have. Yeah, exactly. We have to be careful with bipolar 1.
Okay. So it's, So depression then, you see a lot of people with depression, but less so with mania.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So some people are saying they suffer from depression or anxiety, very high in neuroticism. And so some of these people react badly to cannabis. Is that someone that should be careful around ayahuasca?
No, they're very different. What we recommend, if people are, for example, the people that you're saying are probably not using cannabis because they don't have a good experience. But if some people are using cannabis as a plant medicine, we recommend they stay off of it for 30 days. And that just helps the person have a more clean experience. But if somebody has an issue with cannabis, it doesn't correlate over to ayahuasca. It's totally okay.
Okay, interesting. And then this is just a question for me. I know some people who are prone to schizophrenia, like that hits, particularly males in their late teens, right? And sometimes that can be increased with cannabis use. Is that something that people have to be worried about with ayahuasca?
Not with ayahuasca. And the reason is because of the way that the neurochemical response is occurring in the body and in the brain. People that have a predisposition to schizophrenia, whether it's a family bloodline or there's something going on, things that cause stimulant effects, like sativa cannabis, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and also crystal meth, cocaine, and all the stimulant medications. Those are things that can kickstart a schizophrenic episode and can kind of like push a person to have that occur. Ayahuasca is considered a depressant, and it's not something that leads a person into schizophrenia or kickstarts them in that way. So that's really good, obviously.
Interesting. No, that is really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the average age? 2 questions. What's the average age of people who come visit you, and is there an age limit?
We take anybody from 18 years old and up, and we've had people in their 90s come and do really
that's
well.
Cool. That is so cool.
So there's no age limit. Yeah, there was a 96-year-old woman who came, and she loved it so much that she extended another week and stayed and came again a year later. I mean, incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah, she was great. So our average age is in the mid 40s to early 50s. But we've had 18-year-olds there, and we've had every age and group there is, but our average age is like 40s to 50s. Plenty of 30-year-olds, plenty of 20-year-olds, 70-year-olds. But our right in the middle group is late 40s, early 50s.
Okay, cool. Do people generally come by themselves, or do you recommend coming with somebody? Is there a better way to do this?
Let's say somebody's having a couples issues in their marriage or their relationship. We recommend that they come by themselves first,
really?
and then come as a couple. Yeah. Now we've seen people come as a couple and do great. But what tends to happen if you come as a couple is you go, oh, okay, I'm worried about my partner, or, I'm trying to figure out what's going on with them. And I don't worry about or focus on myself. That's kind of a natural thing. So if people come as a couple, which they do all the time, and it's totally okay, we just usually have them separate during a plant medicine session. So they're on opposite sides of the room.
That actually does make a lot of sense. Yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense. If you're trying to work through your own issues, you don't have to be worrying about how the other person's doing the whole time. That makes sense.
So a lot of people come by themselves, and a lot of women come by themselves. And Costa Rica is a really safe place. And we pick you up at the airport. I mean, it's super, super safe. So it's totally okay to come alone.
Okay, cool. Do people what's the living situation like? How does that work?
So we have three different kinds of rooms with different price points. Some people want their own room by themselves, a king room. And they have that, and they just have their own space, their own bathroom, their own rooms. Like we look like a resort, because we were a hotel that we purchased and converted it into a medical facility. So there's all these bungalows everywhere, and there's king rooms, and there's double queen rooms, and people sometimes come with friends and they share a double queen room. And then we have triple rooms for people. It's lower price. We're working on a bunch of more singles that are in the triple price range. We're expanding, and we're having more rooms available. So it's really, really nice resort. It's it's beautiful. It's by the beach. It's right near a JW Marriott in Costa Rica, northern Pacific side.
Nice.
You can bike to the ocean. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's a great facility.
So how long does an ayahuasca trip last? Like, what time do you start, and when do people go to bed eventually?
On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we start at 5:30 in the afternoon, and then right around 1 in, it's done. And then we pick people up and walk them back. All the staff drives in the golf carts. Everybody takes them back. And if people need to, they're still in their process, they can stay in the space, and we have staff that sit with them. And it's usually over by about 1. Now, Thursday night is more of a traditional Colombian ceremony. So we start later, 7:30 in the evening, and it goes until the morning the next day, around 8 or 9 in the morning. That's the grand finale,
Wow, that sounds fascinating. So that's kind of similar to shrooms then. The length of the trip, depending on the dose. Okay.
If somebody drank one drink and they didn't do because we offer 4 times a night to drink. If somebody just drank one time, it would only last about 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
Or less. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know
the half-life is short. Yeah. DMT half-life is very short. So because people are drinking 2 times or 3 times, sometimes 4 times, that's why it extends out until about 1 in the morning for most people.
So if you're not having a good time and you drink it once, then you can just take that night off.
Correct.
Oh, well, that's really good to know because with shrooms, you can't really take any time off once you do it.
When you're in it, you're in it. Yeah.
You're kind of in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So a lot of people here have heard about ayahuasca retreats in Peru. I got a bunch of messages about that, and they're
hmm
wondering if they don't have a lot of money, how is it that they can afford something like this?
If they go to the Rhythmia website, right away comes up a window of a scholarship application. So they can come for free. So we offer a ton
That's
of
nice.
scholarships. Yeah. And other places are more affordable, like in the jungles of Peru. Absolutely. There's great ones, but there's a lot that are a little sketchy and people don't really know what they're kind of walking into. But again, it's affordable, so it's inviting in that sense. So I would recommend just filling out an application with us, because everybody that wants to come to Rhythmia will eventually be able to come. That's our goal.
Great. That's great. That's a great goal. For your average person with a strong constitution. Yeah, okay. So average person doesn't have maybe like yourself, like you weren't
Yeah,
dealing with anything obvious anyway, dramatically
yeah.
obvious. How often do unpleasant trips occur?
Well, for me, I've done it a lot, obviously, but
How
I
many
think
times? How
probably
many times do you think you've done it?
I've done it probably 60 plus times,
Okay.
60, 70 times. Um, But I believe that the first 10 or 12 times that I did it, I got most of what I needed. I was doing it afterwards, to kind of test out different medicines and kind of get a vibe for what we were going to present and offer to the guests. So
Mm.
my own therapeutic process was about 10 or 12 ayahuasca ceremonies. And I personally never had any bad ones in there. But I do see, I'd say probably maybe 5 to 10% of our guests might have a scary night or a scary moment. And it's something that is very therapeutically beneficial. So
Mm.
I haven't seen anybody at our facility have something that was devastating to them. It's all about the context that we help them have with the integration that occurs during the daytime for them afterwards.
Yeah, that's really important. The only time I've ever had, like, I've never had a catastrophic trip, but the only time I've had one that was, I was uncomfortable in it. I was panicky a bit and was like, well, what's going on? Like, I find people who have bad trips, sometimes they feel like they can't breathe and things. And so I knew I was
Mm-hmm.
having a bad trip when I was having it. But I still got some of the benefits afterwards. So I'm wondering if ayahuasca does this as well, is I find this sense of calm, like serious calm and mood stability, regardless of how the trip went for, up one day to maybe a week after. Does ayahuasca
Mm-hmm.
give
Mm-hmm.
you that as well?
Yeah, but what we're seeing, because we're sending out surveys when people leave, we're sending out a 10-day survey and a 3-month survey and a 6-month survey. What we're seeing is that 98% of the guests are still in the zone. And
Oh,
so we have these
wow.
incredible statistics that we keep. We keep a ton of data. We have about 130,000 data points that we're compiling with what we're offering to the guests. So that vibe, if people are still doing healthy stuff for them, afterwards, eating right, having a daily practice, trying to make the right decisions for themselves, it can continue indefinitely, which is really exciting and kind of hard to believe because most stuff is not like that. Now
Yeah.
that sort of pink cloud, like that we call in addiction, the pink cloud, where everybody's so happy and excited and they feel sober and they're great. That lasts for several months afterwards. That really excited space. It's really cool.
That's really fascinating. I went to a talk with Dennis McKenna and my husband, and this was before my husband had done any type of hallucinogen. And McKenna was talking about how this can be a completely transformative experience, and it's unlike anything anyone's experienced. And Andres, my husband, was just like, he scoffed. He scoffed, and I was like, "Whoa, this is like,
Yeah.
we'll see how you feel about this in a couple of weeks."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I said, I haven't done ayahuasca. I want to, I will, but hallucinogens are definitely an experience that I would say I recommend to most people. It's unbelievable. You can't imagine. It's like seeing a new color, right? It's more than that.
Yeah, it's incredible. Well, I just think that most hallucinogens, like I was saying earlier when we were discussing this, is that you kind of just get out of your own way and you see things from a different perspective. And sometimes, we're right. We're sitting in our emotions that can be overwhelming, and we know intellectually what to do, but we just can't get the emotional energy to do it. And plant medicine helps us in all these different ways, help us kind of like get past that, so that's the healing in it. It's just wonderful to see.
Yeah, it's incredible. I felt like the last experience I had, I felt like it was reality that I'm experiencing now is kind of like on the hallucinogen. It was like a Band-Aid been torn off. It just showed me like everything that I didn't like, I kind of knew, but didn't really want to know. And like you said earlier, it showed me how I was contributing. This was rough, how I was contributing negatively to every relationship in my life. And it was like, these are the little like pokey things you say, or like how you kind of undermine this other person. And I was just like, oh my God, that was like just a slap in the face.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah.
What people are also, not used to having, if they do hallucinogens, they're not used to having a team of people right there to help them process and talk through what's going on. So if I have a bad trip, I'm in my living room and I got just my buddies, everybody leaves the next day. Well, I'm just freaked out and I'm confused and scared, and they just move on. And it was a horrible night. But that's not what's going on at our place, because people that have a so-called bad trip learn what it means and learn about it. And they sit with us and we talk to them. We do therapy, right? And there's all this support. So when people leave, they're not like thinking, oh, that was a bad trip. They're like, wow, that was very impactful. I needed to see that. That was very important for my life.
That's good. Yeah. Because the things I think that have been stopping me from going to a place like Rhythmia is I'm fairly extroverted, but I'm not particularly comfortable around strangers. So what stopped me was, well, I don't necessarily want to be around strangers when I'm doing something that's as intimate as like a hallucinogenic trip. So that's one of the things.
Sure.
But it is good to be able to talk to people about it. That really helps.
It is. And, the way we run the facility, because all the guests have such different needs, and they all come from different backgrounds. They come from all over the world. I mean, we have people from Dubai, from all over Asia, US, Canada, Latin America. We have people from everywhere come, all over Europe. And there's cultural beliefs, and there's also social sort of norms that are different for everybody. And sometimes we got to have a place off to the side for a guest, during the plant medicine session, where they can feel safe and comfortable. Or maybe we have a woman that's been through a lot of trauma from men, and we don't want her laying right next to a man. We want to have her off by the side, maybe with some other supportive women, or just by herself or whatever. So we adjust the program in a sense to kind of meet the needs of that individual client, which is a client-centered, client-based approach that we take. That I brought that sort of approach back from, all of my therapy years, doing client-centered therapy.
Yeah, I like that. And I guess the other benefit is you get to meet people who are open to this kind of thing and are probably fascinating. So it's one benefit from doing it with a number of other people. Yeah. So then I guess another question, what's the difference, do you think, between having, you went into it a bit, but between having a guide and not having a guide on some of these trips?
Well, I think if somebody, now with ayahuasca, right, there's shamans around and all these assistants and helpers, and they're providing a safe space, but they're not really guiding you. Guiding is more related to other plant medicines like iboga. And iboga definitely has a guide and a shaman talking to you and giving you context in the moment and going into detail with you. Now, ayahuasca, there can be a bit of a guidance vibe if somebody is confused or struggling, they raise their hand. They go, hey, I'm tripping on this. I don't understand. There's all this stuff happening. Then the shamans will help sort of guide them a bit and move energy through and out of the space. So I think the important thing is that if people are not guided or don't have a safe space, and, you know, I grew up in LA, and in Venice, California, they're doing doing ayahuasca all the time.
Yeah.
And it's real sketchy. It's real sketchy because there's no guidance, there's no support. It's a bunch of people in a garage or a basement. It's not good, in my opinion, because if you're going to be working with people energetically and also spiritually and also emotionally, you really got to know what you're doing. And it takes a lot of training and a lot of it's like a calling, right? Like as psychologists, we didn't just fall into this career as psychologists. Like we have a knack for it. It's what we're interested in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you know all about that field too, right? So it's kind of like having a guided experience is very important for safety, for emotional and spiritual safety.
Okay. That makes sense. That's do you guys do more plant medicine, or is it mainly ayahuasca?
I initially had us licensed for San Pedro, and we used to do San Pedro in the mornings, which is a cactus, and it's similar.
I actually have not heard of that. I feel like I've heard of a lot of things, and I've not heard of that.
It's similar to peyote, but it's not as strong as peyote. Peyote is much more psychedelic and much more visual. So it's a daytime plant medicine, and it's a masculine plant medicine, whereas ayahuasca is more of a feminine energy. And we used to do those in the mornings. So ayahuasca at night, San Pedro in the morning. But what we were seeing that some people just were not able to function, you know, in the supportive groups and classes that we had. So we pulled it. But we also do rapé. If you ever heard of rapé?
I have heard of rapé. Can you fill me in again on exactly what that is?
Rapé is a shamanic snuff. So it's like it's a powder. It's made in these indigenous tribes, and it's got mostly it's got some tobacco, but also has a lot of herbs. Again, that are regional based on the tribe that's making it. So it can have up to 50 or more herbs, or fewer depending on the tribe. And it's administered by a shaman up the nose, like a little blow, like a little spray. And what that does is it aligns the chakras and gets people grounded and helps people open up. And there's all these millions of different kinds of rapé, but the ones that we use help people get centered and more receptive to the ayahuasca. So we do that right at the beginning of each session. And then if guests are sort of stuck or not, you know, they're coming out of the vibe, they can also get it during the session as well.
Okay. So your shamans, the people who are helping, how did you manage to find those guys?
That was not easy. That was probably the hardest thing I've done as the administrator there. So we have a guy, his name is Taito Juanito, and he's from a Colombian indigenous tribe, and he's an ayahuasca bloodline guy, lives up the Amazon River. You know, comes out once in a while.
Oh yeah, that's gotta be
ceremonies and stuff.
I can see how that could be hard to convince somebody like that. Hey, can you come help us in what we're doing? Or like, who are you?
Wasn't easy. So we were able to, and he comes 4 times a year and hosts a week-long thing with us. And then he's trained a lot of these other shamans. He has a whole team of them. Some have been with him for 30 years. Some have been with him for 1 year. So it's all different zones of guys trained by him. And so we have all these different types of guys and women too, men and women, who have been trained and who administer the plant medicine in the evenings. So we have a lot of helpers too. They're not quote unquote shamans. So we have like a 9-to-1 ratio. So 9 guests and there's at least 1 staff or more. That's our minimum ratio. Usually it's higher ratio than that. So more staff than that. So they're interesting people, you know?
Yeah. Wow.
Coming from a Western thing, you know, medical background that I have, I'm like talking to these guys, and they have a different way of looking at everything, which is wonderful. I mean, I've learned so much from them. They're really cool, fun people.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is our way is most definitely not necessarily the most right way, especially in regards to
Correct.
pharmaceuticals. I've had some, I'm not very happy with pharmaceutical companies at the moment.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Okay. Then I think the last question is, I had a couple of people ask, if they wanted to organize a group of people to come themselves, can you do more private events at Rhythmia?
Yeah, we can. And part of our expansion that we're doing is going to be able to accommodate exactly that. So we can definitely talk to people that want to have private events in different groups and smaller groups or whatever. And absolutely. What our data shows, just as an interesting side note, the larger the group, the more successful is our outcome data. And that's very counterintuitive, because if I was with a shaman with 5 people, I would think, right, that I'm going to get what I need. But what we're seeing with the data is that the more people involved in a ceremony, the higher like the synergy of the group is, that kind of propels and helps move people. Yeah, it's really interesting. That's a statistic that I did not expect, but we have data to prove that. Aside from that, yes, we definitely can work with groups and have certain situations occur where they can bring a group of people, and we can absolutely talk about that for sure.
Okay. So then this is my last question, I think. So just for logistics, do people go to your website and buy a plane ticket to Costa Rica? They get picked up at the airport, and it's about a week-long thing unless you want to extend it. That's how it works?
Correct. Yeah, and they show up on Saturday or Sunday. Those are check-in days. So yeah, they go to their website, they call our 800 number, they talk to a representative, we ask them a bunch of medical questions. If there's uncertainty, then they get a hold of me and our medical director. We go over the medical notes, then we clear them. Then they show up, they get their own flight to Liberia, Costa Rica, which is the northern airport in Costa Rica. We pick them up. It's about a 45-minute to an hour drive, bring them to our place. They're there for a week. They leave on the following Saturday or Sunday. Everything's included, all the farm-to-table food, all the massage. We have a spa, beautiful, beautiful spa, like a 5-star spa, and massages, and there's a pool, and it's beautiful. And then go to the beach, and all that's included. And then at the end, we take them back to the airport, we shuttle them back, and they're off. So that's basically how that works.
Wow. It sounds pretty good. And people aren't too exhausted the next day to go do things?
On Thursday night, which is the final ceremony that goes until Friday morning, right after around maybe like noon or 2 p.m. on Friday, they're good to go. They can go to the beach and cruise around. Okay, some people go zip lining, they do more touristy stuff. And then Saturday, if they leave, some people leave on Sunday. So on Saturday, it's kind of a fun day to go cruise around, check out Costa Rica a little bit. So yeah, they have plenty of energy because they've taken a burden off of them, right? Like they're there to release emotional tension. So they feel like $1 million.
Yeah, clearer, right? Lighter. Okay,
definitely.
I had one more question. Am I going to be able to remember this? Yeah. Okay. So, part of my audience follows, I'm kind of in the paleo, keto diet, carnivore diet area. So a lot of my followers, especially with autoimmune disorders, are on really ridiculously strict diets. Is that going to be manageable? For instance, I've only been eating beef for like 3 years, and that's it. Not quite 3, but a while. So a lot of these people have serious sensitivities to gluten and whatever, and they're going to be quite worried about diet when they're there.
For sure. We absolutely can adjust our diet and our menu to accommodate those guests. Our menu actually fits into all those scenarios. Paleo, also high protein. We don't serve beef products there, but we can get them for sure, because Costa Rica is awesome beef. Amazing.
Okay, cool.
Not a problem. Yeah.
Not a problem. So get in touch if you have concerns. Get in touch if you can't afford to go, but you feel like you need it. And I guess, and maybe, the reason that you put this together, it's to help people sort through issues in a faster, more beneficial way. That seems to be what you're going for, right?
That's right. Because I was so disillusioned by the system that I was working in mental health and in medical healthcare. And this is something that actually works for people. And so it's just something that we want to help change the world with, and one person at a time, and getting empathy for others and having empathy and love for yourself is very important. And we believe that's how the world changes. So that's what we're out to do.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I think people are going to find
Thanks for having me.
Super interesting. And yeah, I would urge anyone who's trying to sort out, because you can have some serious issues with your life. And as I very well know, covering those up with pharmaceuticals, that I would not recommend that. Right. And this is a good way, and it sounds like a safe way to try and get to the bottom of it with a supportive community. So yeah, thanks again for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to hopefully meeting you down there and all your guests, all your viewers. That'd be awesome.
Yes. I will come down at some point, but
cool.
I'll talk to you later.
Pura vida.